The camera locks on Jasmine Crockett, her eyes steady, her voice sharp, each syllable slicing through the studio air like a blade. Across from her, Kash Patel leans back with that familiar smug grin, convinced that his interruption, his condescension, will once again silence the opposition. But Crockett doesn't flinch. She doesn't stumble. Instead, she leans forward, just slightly, the kind of movement that signals something seismic is about to land. Then it happens. The line. The comeback so clean, so devastating, that the studio erupts, gasps, scattered applause. Even stunned silence lingers in the corners of the room. Patel's grin falters, the smirk replaced by a blink of disbelief. Crockett's words hang suspended in the air, echoing beyond the walls of the set, destined to replay across millions of screens. Freeze the moment. Time itself halts. Her stare burns with conviction. His face, once dripping with confidence, now betrays the sting of being publicly outmaneuvered. And, over it all, a single voice cuts in. What you're about to see left millions stunned. The scene is cinematic. Crockett, the embodiment of calm power, standing tall in the spotlight. Patel, draped in arrogance, suddenly stripped bare by a truth he never saw coming. This wasn't just an exchange of words. It was a collision, two worlds, two visions of what America should stand for. And in that single strike, Crockett shifted the room. Viewers at home leaned closer. Comment sections ignited. The clip, already unforgettable, carried the weight of something larger than politics. It was about dignity, about pride, about proving that when arrogance tries to mock, belittle, and erase, resilience doesn't just answer back, it triumphs. But here's the thing about viral moments. They don't appear out of thin air. They are forged in the fires of history, in backstory, in rising stakes that no one could have scripted better. What you just witnessed was the culmination of years of tension, clashing identities, and a stage perfectly set for a reckoning. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because to truly understand how Jasmine Crockett brought Kash Patel to his knees with a single sentence, we need to go back to where the storm first began. The lights of the studio burned brighter than usual that night. Cameras swept across the stage, capturing every flicker of expression, every twitch of impatience. This wasn't some obscure panel buried in the late-night news cycle. It was prime time, broadcast live, with millions of eyes fixed on every word. Across living rooms, airports, bars, and cell phones glowing in the hands of restless commuters, America was tuned in. Everyone knew sparks were about to fly, but no one knew just how explosive the night would become. For Jasmine Crockett, this was more than a televised debate. It was an opportunity to show that dignity can stand its ground against mockery. She sat composed, her presence both elegant and unyielding, radiating the calm confidence of someone who had fought her way into every room she now entered. On the other side, Kash Patel projected the smirking arrogance of a man convinced the stage belonged to him. To Patel, this wasn't a conversation. It was a performance. Another chance to score points by belittling his opponent. Another attempt to flex power through ridicule. The tension built long before the first sharp exchange. You could feel it in the way Patel interrupted, speaking over Crockett with rehearsed dismissals. You could hear it in the sighs from the audience, the restless shifting of people who had grown tired of the same old act. And you could sense it in Crockett's stillness. She wasn't just waiting for her turn to speak. She was calculating, holding her fire, letting Patel pile up the rope he would eventually hang himself with. This wasn't just a debate. It was a test of whether arrogance could continue to dominate America's public stage, or whether dignity, rooted in truth, identity, and lived struggle, could finally push back. Patel embodied the sneer of entitlement, the swagger of someone who had always counted on bluster to silence the opposition. Crockett represented something more powerful, the voice of a community that had fought too long and too hard to be dismissed again. Millions of viewers leaned forward, sensing the collision that was coming. Social media feeds were already buzzing in real time, with hashtags forming as clips and soundbites spread faster than the moderators could move the conversation forward. People weren't just watching, they were choosing sides, attaching themselves to a narrative much bigger than two people at a table. And beneath it all, there was a question pulsing in the room, unspoken but undeniable. Who would define the moment? Would it be Patel with his arsenal of interruptions and insinuations, or Crockett with her sharp intellect and unshakable composure? The air tightened as Patel leaned in, his tone shifting from dismissive to outright mocking. He had been circling Crockett all night with little jabs and smirks, but now, emboldened by the cameras, he decided to go further. This was the move he thought would crush her, the line he believed would leave her flustered, silenced, humiliated. "Oh, please," he said, a condescending pause hanging in the air like a balloon ready to pop. "We all know what this is really about, don't we? You're just here to play the victim." "It's cute, really," he chuckled, practically daring her to take the bait. But arrogance has a way of overreaching. The words Patel chose next would not only cross a line, it would ignite a moment that no one in the studio and no one watching across America would ever forget. Because as the nation held its breath, Kash Patel stepped too far. And what happened next left the audience in absolute shock. Before that night on live television, Kash Patel was already a familiar figure in Washington's combative political theater. To his allies, he was the loyal enforcer, the man who would do the jobs others were too cautious to touch. To his critics, he was the very embodiment of arrogance, a political attack dog who thrived on confrontation, not compromise. And like many who build their brand on bluster, he believed the act could carry him forever. Patel's rise had been unconventional, yet strategically crafted. A former defense attorney turned political operative, he maneuvered himself into the inner circles of power during one of the most turbulent periods in recent American history. As senior staffer, advisor, and eventually chief of staff at the Pentagon, Patel developed a reputation as someone who would fiercely defend his chosen side, no matter the cost, no matter the credibility sacrificed in the process. Where others hesitated, Patel pushed forward. Where others measured their words, he went on the attack. It made him visible. It made him indispensable. And in Washington, it made him notorious. Controversy clung to Patel's career like a shadow. He was linked to partisan investigations that critics said were less about truth and more about spectacle. His name surfaced in headlines accusing him of weaponizing intelligence, of bending the narrative to fit the agenda of those he served. And while defenders praised him as loyal, opponents painted him as reckless, a man who confused bullying for strength and mistook intimidation for leadership. On television, Patel became known for a particular style: dismissive laughter, smirking interruptions, the tone of a man who believed he was always the smartest in the room. He didn't just debate, he belittled. He didn't just argue, he steamrolled. For years, this approach worked. Opponents would falter, frustrated, unable to match the sheer force of his interruptions. To Patel, that was victory. Confusion mistaken for dominance. Silence mistaken for defeat. But the flaw in Patel's style was always there, lurking beneath the surface. Arrogance is only effective until it meets someone who refuses to be rattled. His career of condescension, of talking over, of turning moments of seriousness into moments of mockery had created a predictable pattern. It was a script he followed time and time again. Drown out your opponent, sneer at their points, laugh at their passion. That formula had carried him into prominence. But it was the same formula that would set him up for disaster, because arrogance is blind. Blind to the strength of those who have fought too long to be silenced. Blind to the fact that interruptions and smirks can only hold power if the other side plays along. Patel's downfall was written not in his words that night, but in his history. Years of dismissing voices like Jasmine Crockett's, years of assuming that dignity could never outshine derision. And that night on national television, Patel walked onto the stage carrying all of that baggage with him. His trademark smirk wasn't just an expression, it was a symbol of everything that had defined his political persona. The interruptions, the jabs, the swagger, all of it poured out in real time, as though he was running the same tired playbook that had worked so many times before. He believed he was untouchable, that once again his opponent would stumble, that once again the smirk would win. But what Patel didn't recognize was that his act had grown stale. Viewers at home had seen it too many times. Audiences were tired of the arrogance, tired of the interruptions, tired of the politics of bullying. And sitting across from him that night was someone who had no intention of playing the victim. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another opponent. She was a lawyer who had faced down impossible odds, a congresswoman who had been underestimated at every turn, a woman who had made a career of standing unshaken when others tried to tear her down. Patel thought his dismissive laugh would rattle her. He thought his mocking tone would silence her. He thought his history of bulldozing debates would work one more time. But arrogance always miscalculates. That night, Patel's smirk met its match. His trademark dismissiveness collided with a force it couldn't dismantle, and the moment he tried the same tired trick on Jasmine Crockett, the pattern finally broke. Patel leaned in, clearly thinking he had the upper hand. The familiar smirk crept up, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Oh, I see. It's the 'I'm just a poor, misunderstood soul' act, right? How original." He paused, letting the sarcasm linger in the air like a bad perfume. "Really, Jasmine, we've all seen this before. Same song, different tune. But don't worry, I'm sure it's all very moving to some people." He sat back, as if he had just dropped the mic, waiting for her to buckle. But Crockett didn't flinch. No nervous shift, no crack in her composure. She simply tilted her head slightly, meeting his condescension with an unbroken stare. The room seemed to hold its breath, because this time, the sneer wasn't enough. This time, his tricks were too tired to win the moment. Patel's smirk wavered for a split second. That was all it took. The audience noticed. The cameras caught it. The shift was subtle, but it was undeniable. And that moment, right there, was when Patel's game of dismissing and mocking his opponents finally met its end. Because arrogance, no matter how many times it's recycled, only works if the person across from you lets it. Before Jasmine Crockett turned Kash Patel's smirk into a meme factory, she already had the resume for it. Spoiler alert, this wasn't some lucky one-liner. Crockett's entire life has basically been one long warm-up for shutting people like Patel down. See, Crockett didn't grow up with a silver spoon or a VIP pass to Washington cocktail parties. Nope. She came from the kind of neighborhoods where opportunity wasn't mailed to your doorstep. And while most kids were told to sit down and be quiet, Jasmine was the kid standing up, already asking why the rules didn't make sense. Spoiler, she never stopped. That stubborn streak carried her straight into law. Not the cushy corporate kind where you bill $800 an hour for stapling papers. No, she went into the trenches. Courtrooms packed with people the system would rather ignore. She became that lawyer, the one prosecutors hated to see walk in because they knew she wasn't going to roll over. She didn't just defend clients, she went to war for them. And every time somebody doubted her, she made them regret it. By the time politics came calling, Crockett already had a reputation, sharp, fearless, allergic to BS. But surprise, surprise, when a black woman with fire in her voice shows up in politics, suddenly she's too brash, too direct, too much. Translation, she refused to play nice with people who only play nice when it protects their own power. But here's the twist. Crockett knew how to weaponize being underestimated. While her critics were busy whispering that she didn't belong, she was out there building speeches that sliced through the noise like a hot knife through hypocrisy. Her clips didn't go viral because she tried to be catchy. They went viral because she actually meant it. Fast forward, Texas legislature, Congress, headlines, viral moments. Crockett built a brand by being unapologetically herself. And that scared the hell out of people who prefer politics served bland, watered down, and in a polite little box. Too bad for them. Jasmine Crockett is no boxed wine. She's straight fire, unfiltered. So when she sat across from Kash Patel that night on live TV, she wasn't just another guest in a shouting match. She was a walking highlight reel of courtroom battles, political scars, and the kind of composure you only earn by surviving rooms full of people praying you'll fail. Patel thought his interruptions would rattle her. Cute. She'd been through worse. And here's the kicker. When she finally hit back, it wasn't just Crockett talking. Millions of viewers, the underestimated, the dismissed, the talked over, heard their own voices in hers. Her stare was their stare. Her comeback was their comeback. Patel thought his smirk would carry the night. Instead, Crockett turned it into confetti. And in one line, she reminded America of a truth Patel should have learned a long time ago. Underestimating Jasmine Crockett is the fastest way to end up as her punchline. The studio lights bore down like a spotlight on history in the making. At one end of the table, Kash Patel leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded with the kind of confidence only arrogance can manufacture. His lips curled into a smirk as he tapped his pen on the table, a small sound meant to signal impatience. At the other end sat Jasmine Crockett, posture straight, gaze unwavering, her hands folded loosely in front of her. Where Patel fidgeted with condescension, Crockett radiated stillness. The moderator posed a question meant to dig into policy, but Patel had no intention of answering directly. Instead, he pivoted. With a chuckle that carried more sneer than humor, he interrupted before Crockett could finish her thought. "That's cute," he said, dismissing her argument with a wave of his hand. The audience shifted, a ripple of discomfort moving across the studio. Crockett did not react. She didn't flinch, didn't rush to overtalk him. She let the silence stretch just long enough for viewers at home to register the contempt dripping from Patel's tone. She waited, her eyes locked on him, her composure a weapon sharper than any insult. But Patel wasn't finished. Emboldened by his own performance, he leaned forward, his voice rising with the cadence of a man who had delivered this routine countless times. "You don't really understand how this works," he sneered, cutting her off again. He laughed lightly, as though the mere suggestion of her authority in the conversation was absurd. This was the act Patel had perfected over years of television appearances. The smirk, the chuckle, the condescending interruptions. He was playing his greatest hits, confident the same tactics that rattled opponents in the past would work once more. Yet Crockett remained steady. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable, a half-smile forming that carried not submission, but something far more dangerous: patience. She was waiting for her opening, the precise moment to deliver the line that would end the act Patel thought he was directing. The back and forth intensified. The moderator tried to regain control, but Patel pressed on, cutting through questions, talking over Crockett's attempts to answer. His interruptions grew sharper, his tone more dismissive, his smirk widening as though he could feel the weight of the cameras on his side. To him, this wasn't just about scoring points. It was about humiliation. He wanted to show the country that Crockett wasn't prepared, that she wasn't on his level, and still, Crockett refused to be baited. She answered calmly when she could, her voice steady and deliberate. When she was interrupted, she allowed the audience to hear it clearly. When Patel laughed at her points, she did not join the performance. Instead, she sat in the storm of his arrogance, waiting for it to collapse under its own weight. The tension was electric. Viewers at home could sense it, the clash of two forces, one built on noise and dismissal, the other on quiet strength and unbreakable dignity. Social media lit up in real time, with clips already circulating of Patel's interruptions, captions reading, "Here we go again." And then, the moment arrived. Patel, drunk on his own performance, pushed too far. His smirk widened into a sneer as he leaned back in his chair and delivered the line he thought would crush her completely. The words dripped with mockery, designed not to debate but to belittle, to erase, to silence. And then Patel went too far, and the room fell silent. The silence was suffocating, the kind of silence that doesn't just hang in the air, but presses down on it, thick and unrelenting. Patel's last words still lingered, ugly and smug, designed to dismiss Jasmine Crockett not as an equal, but as someone unworthy of the stage they shared. His smirk told the story of a man convinced he had landed the final blow, a man rehearsed in using arrogance as a weapon. But then, the silence shifted. It was no longer Patel's silence. It was hers. Crockett leaned forward slowly, deliberately, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment all night. The camera zoomed in, capturing the piercing steadiness of her eyes as they locked onto Patel's. No smile, no laugh, no outward sign of anger, just precision. For a heartbeat, the room didn't breathe. The audience sat suspended between Patel's self-satisfaction and the sense that something was about to happen, something that would fracture the smugness into shards too sharp for him to hold. And then she spoke. The words cut through the silence like lightning through a summer sky. Sharp, blinding, undeniable. Her tone was calm, yet laced with steel. The kind of voice that doesn't need to shout to command attention. Each syllable landed like a gavel strike, deliberate and final. Patel blinked, caught off guard. The smirk faltered. For years he had relied on interruption as both shield and sword, disarming opponents before they found their footing. But this was different. Crockett wasn't scrambling to respond. She wasn't stammering. She wasn't defensive. She was in full command, and the weight of that reality hit him with devastating clarity. The audience erupted. Gasps first, sharp intakes of breath as the line registered. Then applause, thunderous and rolling, like a wave crashing against the smug wall Patel had built around himself. The energy in the room shifted instantly. What had been his stage was now hers. What had been his game was now her victory. Viewers at home felt it too. Screens lit up with reactions, people rewinding the moment, clipping it, sharing it, typing furiously. "Did you see that? Crockett just ended him. This is the moment." Within minutes, hashtags began to trend. Back in the studio, Patel sat frozen, his pen, once an instrument of distraction, now motionless in his hand. His eyes darted toward the moderator as though searching for an escape hatch, a reset button, anything to undo what had just unfolded. But there was no undoing. The cameras had captured it all. His arrogance, her patience, his mockery, her counterattack. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't lean back and bask in applause. Instead, she sat firmly in her truth, her expression steady, her gaze unwavering. The audience was still clapping, still cheering, and yet she remained grounded, as if reminding everyone that this wasn't about spectacle. It was about dignity. Patel tried to recover. He opened his mouth, searching for another line, another interruption, something to claw back control. But the words stumbled out half-formed, his voice cracking under the weight of his own unraveling. He chuckled nervously, trying to reassemble the smirk, but the magic was gone. The audience wasn't laughing with him anymore. They were watching him shrink. In that moment, the polarity of hero and villain could not have been clearer. Patel, once so sure of his dominance, now looked small, deflated, a man exposed by his own tactics. And Crockett, unapologetically bold, composed, unflinching, stood taller than ever, not in physical height, but in presence, in moral gravity. The moderator tried to move forward, to restore the rhythm of debate, but the atmosphere had changed. Everything that followed would be colored by what had just occurred. Crockett had seized the narrative, and Patel had become the story of arrogance undone. And for the audience, both in the studio and across the nation, the moment lingered like an echo. Parents nudged their children, whispering, "Did you hear that?" That strength viewers from marginalized communities, so often talked over and dismissed, saw themselves in Crockett's composure, her refusal to be silenced, her brilliance in turning disdain into downfall. It wasn't just a clapback, it was vindication. Patel sat, visibly smaller, his eyes cast downward as Crockett answered the next question with clarity and conviction. She no longer had to fight for space. The room was hers. The moderator nodded, the audience leaned in, and even the cameras seemed to shift, framing her as the undeniable focal point of the evening. The clash had ended, but the resonance was only beginning. Already, political commentators watching in real time scrambled to adjust their talking points. Networks cut clips, panelists prepared their takes, and social media surged with the electricity of a cultural turning point. For Patel, it was a devastating unraveling. For Crockett, it was a crowning moment of strength and validation. The debate rolled on, but nothing could eclipse the mic drop. It wasn't just an exchange of words. It was the crystallization of a larger struggle: arrogance versus dignity, dismissal versus determination, a tired old performance versus the arrival of a new, unyielding force. And as the applause echoed, as Patel's smirk disappeared into silence, one truth became undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had redefined the battle. But the shockwaves didn't end in that room. The moment Crockett delivered her line, the ripple effect was immediate, like a stone hurled into a still lake, sending shockwaves across every corner of American life. Within seconds, clips of the exchange lit up social media. On Twitter, hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #PatelOwned began trending nationwide. TikTok is flooded with edits replaying the line in slow motion, paired with dramatic soundtracks or celebratory remixes. Memes sprouted instantly, Patel's stunned expression frozen next to captions reading, "When you realized the roast was about you." It wasn't just political junkies watching. Everyday viewers, students, workers, parents shared the moment with captions like, "This is why representation matters," and "She said what needed to be said." For many, Crockett's composure was more than just a debate win. It was a cultural victory, a reclaiming of dignity in spaces too often dominated by arrogance. Supporters erupted with pride. Activists hailed Crockett as a new standard-bearer for courage in politics. Community leaders wrote threads connecting her strength to broader struggles against dismissal and disrespect. One viral post read, "We've all been in that meeting, in that classroom, in that space where someone like Patel tried to silence us. Tonight, Jasmine Crockett spoke for all of us." Meanwhile, Patel's defenders scrambled. Some tried to downplay the moment, insisting viewers were overreacting. Others attempted to spin it, suggesting Patel had let Crockett speak for dramatic effect, a claim so absurd it only fueled more mockery. His smirk, once his shield, became a symbol of his undoing. Screenshots of his face circulated with captions like, "Arrogance meets karma." Cable news seized the story with the urgency of breaking headlines. Commentators dissected the exchange frame by frame, looping the clip like a sports highlight. Liberal hosts celebrated Crockett's mastery, while even conservative pundits, hesitant to praise her outright, admitted Patel had lost control of the room. Celebrities weighed in too. Comedians turned the moment into punchlines for late-night monologues, while musicians tweeted out praise, calling Crockett's words bars. One actress posted the clip with the caption, "This is the kind of energy we need in 2025. Even Crockett's political rivals couldn't ignore it. Some, begrudgingly respectful, acknowledged her poise. Others, careful not to appear aligned, offered muted statements that only highlighted the power of what had transpired. But the real impact was cultural. In barbershops, classrooms, and kitchen tables across the country, people were talking about the debate. Not policy points, not poll numbers, but that moment. Teachers replayed it in civics lessons as an example of staying composed under pressure. Parents showed it to their kids as proof that you don't have to shout to win. And beneath the noise, the message deepened. Crockett's clapback was not just about Patel. It was about anyone who has ever been interrupted, belittled, or dismissed. It was about standing firm in the face of arrogance and letting truth do the work. The shockwaves kept spreading, louder and wider, reshaping the narrative of the debate and, for some, reshaping the idea of what political courage looks like. But amid all the noise, a deeper lesson was emerging. When the laughter, applause, and hashtags began to fade into the background, what lingered was something far more powerful than a viral clip. Jasmine Crockett's clapback was more than a moment of triumph over Kash Patel. It was a lesson etched in real time before millions about the enduring strength of dignity when faced with arrogance. Think of it. Patel came armed with interruptions, smirks, and the old tactics of belittlement. Crockett brought nothing but her voice, her composure, and her unshakable belief that the truth could speak louder than arrogance. In a world where noise so often drowns out clarity, her restraint became her greatest weapon. It wasn't just Crockett versus Patel. It was dignity versus dismissal, calm truth versus performative spin, and dignity won. The beauty of the moment lay in its simplicity. She didn't need to raise her voice or trade insult for insult. She proved that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in calm, precise sentences that pierce through the fog of arrogance. Her words reminded us all. One voice, calm and clear, can cut through the noise. And that is why the moment resonated so deeply beyond the stage. People recognized themselves in her. Immigrants who have been told to wait their turn. Women are silenced in boardrooms. Young people dismissed for being too idealistic. Workers are spoken over in meetings. Crockett's composure was not just her own victory. It was a victory for everyone who has ever been underestimated and found the courage to stand tall anyway. The lesson is universal. You don't have to mirror arrogance to defeat it. You don't have to descend into mockery to win respect. True power lies in dignity, in knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone strip that away. Crockett showed that night that leadership is not about volume, but about vision, and that vision rests on truth. As the clip spread, it carried with it more than just entertainment value. It carried hope. It carried a reminder that integrity still matters, that courage still counts, that even in the noisiest arenas, grace under pressure can rewrite the script. And so, when we look back at this clash, we'll remember more than Patel's smirk collapsing into silence. We'll remember the quiet strength that filled the space after. We'll remember the way a single line delivered without anger commanded respect. We'll remember the lesson it carried. That truth, spoken with dignity, will always outlast spin. Because moments like this aren't just about politics. They're about us. Jasmine Crockett's savage comeback wasn't just a clapback. It was history, a moment where arrogance met its match, where one calm voice cut through the noise and reminded America that dignity still matters. What we witnessed wasn't simply about politics. It was about the universal fight between truth and spin, between dismissal and respect, between arrogance and grace. And here's the part that matters most. This wasn't just Jasmine Crockett's victory. It was ours. Every person who has ever been underestimated, interrupted, or told to know their place could see themselves in her. She stood tall, so we could all remember what it looks like to win without losing yourself. So let this moment be more than entertainment. Let it be fuel. In your own life, when arrogance tries to silence you, whether in the classroom, the workplace, or even your own home, remember Crockett's composure. Remember her fire. Stand tall. Speak with clarity. Know that dignity, even in the face of arrogance, carries a power that cannot be erased. And if this story moved you, if it gave you pride, validation, or just a little bit of hope, don't let it stop here. Subscribe so you never miss the next moment that cuts through the noise. Share this video so others can feel what you felt. Drop a comment to tell us where you were when you first saw the clip and how it made you feel. Because together, we're not just viewers, we're a movement of people who refuse to be silenced. And the next time arrogance steps onto the stage, remember, dignity always has the last word.